school into 1,000-student elementary school, up to 1,000. We could, at that point, once we got into specifics and moved forward with what that would look like, come back to you and say, here are the plans for the remainder of that building. And we feel like that we could affect other facilities with some things as we move forward from there. So we brought that plan back. They gave us a number of $80 million, if I believe I'm saying that correctly, that they thought we could accomplish those two projects. I've given you an $85 million number because I think that if you expand that up, we can build the gym at Santa Fe. There's your fourth item of the 6 items that were on that list, and that may give us a little bit of money to go into an elementary school somewhere and work on some aesthetics. I specifically mentioned Mount Pleasant Elementary because let me tell you, we kicked that down the road as over the last few years we've talked about what we're going to do with it, and we've left some things out. So we think that what I would like to do and what our plan that we discussed would just say, go to the commission, here's a dollar amount, and here are the things, we're going to push this money to the absolute limit. First priority, the high school. Second priority, Spring Hill High School. Third priority is the gym at Santa Fe. And then anything beyond that will be put into renovating schools. We'll come back to you if you want us to, but here's the number on that number. And we feel like that going away from maybe the some of the Battle Creek decisions that were made, that we can come in, we can build a high school that has what is needed in a high school. We've already looked at the property. We know that it will fit. And we can come in, build a high school that has the needs met and not run into numbers that could seemingly get off of the page.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask the members of the board who were at that meeting on the Saturday morning in February, does this sound like what was discussed? Because I wasn't here. I want to make sure, as a board, that we're not just pulling, I'm not accusing you of doing this, but I want to make sure that this is something that has been well thought out. Honestly, this is the first time I'm seeing it, but I also wasn't here for that meeting. So.
And we're coming back off of just the discussion that morning and bringing numbers. We actually debated internally, do we even need to make this request this year? But then
that's my question.
The other question, you know, we've had some input that said if you don't make it this year, you know, you may not get it this year, but you're laying the conversation and the groundwork for next year. So we're completely at your discretion on this. Those were the two options that were discussed that morning. We did get feedback on those. Those folks are here, but we're bringing it to you and saying, here it is. You tell us what you want to do and how you want to move forward with it.
Ms. Parker.
I think this is along the lines of what we discussed, but I think there was some pushback about location and whatnot, and I think Eric covered that as far as why they chose to go here. I will just say, having been on this board when we approved Columbia Central, this is like double the cost, and that's just crazy to me because we did have the land for Central. This is just kind of exorbitant to me. I'm just going to be honest. And I know that, like, construction costs have gone up and all that kind of stuff, but this is, we spent $65 million building Battle Creek Elementary and Battle Creek Middle. Like, I don't know that that was the best decision for us to have made, but that was the decision this board made. I mean, so add those numbers together, and we're talking about $150 million being spent in one area of the county, and we know all the needs that exist throughout this county. That's tough.
Let me get clarification on that. How much of this, and maybe you let Spencer can break this out, is the high school portion of it?
And I'll let them speak to that. Let me just say, this would be a 2,000 student high school and not a 1,600 student high school, which is Columbia Central. It's going to be tight. This also includes athletic facilities, which outside of a concession stand that was mostly donated material at Columbia Central was not part of that process. This also carries over onto a new site, water and sewer, and even though that was repurposed, a lot of the foundational work coming in from the city's point of view was already there. So you do have that, you've got that growth. but this would be converting the football field at Battle Creek. This would be, adding a track at Battle Creek that was planned for in the building of it. This would be a new baseball field, a new softball field. This would be the practice fields. And then we did at Columbia Central repurpose some of the parking, not all of it. Some of it had to be completely redone, but some of it was just repurposed. This would be all new parking, to that degree. So there are some things that would go into new construction that weren't in that process. I'm not gonna speak to the per square foot cost and how it's increased. I'm gonna let them do that.
Well, I guess
But
that's what I'm wanting to know, how much the 80 million is high school
Yeah.
versus conversion of Spring Hill.
But in this number, I'm including, Spring Hill, a new high school, whatever it becomes or is, Santa Fe, and then possibly looking at coming in aesthetically with anything that's left. We know Santa Fe's rough numbers on an auxiliary gym are $3.5 to $4 million. And so you see that coming in, and I will say this, and I don't harken back often, but, you know, the other night, I made the statement, we build multi-million-dollar facilities, and I have people all the time tell me we can build a pole barn, for an auxiliary gym, and we could, but you're gonna have what you have. And in fact, we didn't like the number, we thought the number was too high. We're gonna push on it and say we don't believe in that number, but we have work that has gone into that, specifically to look at those things. So I'll let them talk to you, and then I'm gonna get out of the way until you ask me a question.
Yeah, I just wanna break down of what's what on that one line. $80 million, how much is a high school, how much is renovation? Okay. Just come down here next to Eric.
And I know I said I was jumping out, but let me say this, I did give them the stipulation of that I did not want to go to the commission to ask for planning money and then come back and then ask for money again. So our request of you would be able to go to the commission and saying, this is the amount of money, and we're gonna do our planning within this money as well, not we spent almost $1 million on McDowell plans that we didn't use. So that would be, if they approve it, we're gonna live within the number, and make whatever we have to do with that number be what we come out with.
All right, thank you for being here with us. I'll let you speak.
Yeah, thank you. The request was, either a new elementary school in the north part of the county and upgrade, Spring Hill High School to a 2,000 student high school, or, build a new high school and renovate the old Spring Hill High School into an elementary school. So let me remind those of you who were on this board when y'all hired us, that what made us come down here is that we saw a newspaper article in the Nashville Tennessean, actually, that there was a proposed new Columbia Central High School at $65 million when we first saw that article. And you know that we worked through all of that and came back to the board. We're talking about a lot of time passing from which y'all worked through things, and I know there was some initial work done before we got involved, but from December of 2014 to the end of February of 2015, we came back to you with a less than $43 million guaranteed maximum price to do all that work. And it wasn't just the new work. There were buildings there that were renovated and other types of improvements. So that's what you got at that, but there were no athletic facilities involved in that. And during the course of the work, and Will, this is something that you would appreciate, when we got our guaranteed maximum price approved, this board will remember the members that were here at that time, and some of the county commissioners would remember it too. But one engineering company that was involved in it, that was hired before we got involved, decided that they had miscalculated a factor on the structure of the school that was gonna cost a change order of $550,000 right off the bat, while we were breaking ground and tearing buildings down. We fought that battle for you and showed them where they were wrong, because we knew how to do that sort of thing. And we were liable on it, too. If they were right, we were gonna eat that, not y'all. It wasn't gonna be a change order for y'all, it was gonna be we have to be able to address those types of things. Now, jump ahead, they just opened last year a new high school in Wilson County, 2,000 student high school. I don't know if you noticed how much that was, but they spent over $110 million building that school. And I will tell you, it's a brand new school. I'm sure it's really nice, but what you've got at Columbia Central is just as good or better in some cases than what they've got. And it was a better use of the money. The land use there, which I'm not gonna say any more about that. Let's get back to the fact that, you've got the land for the new school. Most of the utility needs are already provided there. There will be some extension of that. There will be needs for athletic facilities and things of that nature. But with a school that would be comparable, very comparable to Columbia Central there, a new Spring Hill High School, if you will, whatever y'all would decide to name it, we believe that we can give you a GMP of something less than, or about or less than $70 million of that $85 million that Eric gave you. And so therefore, about 10. Now, one thing that those board members of you who have been here know, that we work every day to manage and make sure that money is not wasted. The GMP is the place that we begin to continue to try to save money throughout the entire building program. And so, and you know that there were monies left over in Columbia Central project that benefited, you were able to put it back into things in the school system. You know there was money left over on the Battle Creek School projects that you were able to put back into the school system. And you know, that's what we work towards. So, 2,000 student high school on the existing property, doing the things that we know we need to do to make that functioning with traffic, parking and everything, and then converting roughly $10 million to convert the portion of the current Spring Hill High School into an elementary school, and we believe that would be done. Now, we're not talking about spending money on the other parts of old Spring Hill High School to do other things with, if you decide to use the other parts of that 175,000 square foot project, just the portion that would be needed to give you up to a 1,000 student elementary school if you want to do that. Now, the other thing I want to say about why we're recommending that instead of the other plan of building a new elementary school and upgrading Spring Hill High School, and that is simply time. Searching for land and all the process you have to go through to do that could end up being a very time-consuming thing, and time is money, and prices aren't going down. So that time is a big thing. Plus, there are a lot of things that would have to be done, things that would be torn out and replaced at the current Spring Hill High School, that you can use them some other way without spending money tearing them out. So it's just a better time, less money to go with the new Spring Hill High School and convert the old Spring Hill High School.
Ms. Parker, do you have more questions?
I do. You said 1,000 students for the elementary school?
Up to that,
Up
yes.
to. I was gonna say that's more than what our
That's
policy
more than you
says,
want.
which is 850 max.
And I in talking with Mr. Hickman, we had talked about 800. I thought the new
No,
policy,
it's 500 to 850.
is that's not the updated policy. And
Just
Mr.
about what we have on our website.
Mr. Gerard's been working with TSBA because, we found, we have policies from, October to December that did not get updated.
Okay.
If you'll give me a minute, I'll pull it up. I believe the new policy was to build an 850 up to 1,000, and we specifically did that. If I'm wrong, I'll pull it up and I'll apologize for that.
I think that's middle school.
I
Yeah, I don't
thought
think
middle
that's
school went to
elementary.
12. Okay, we'll work to do that. That 1,000 was at our number. I will say that part of our discussion internally has been, part of our discussion on that Saturday morning, if you put a high school at that point and that size, I'm not gonna promise you right now I can, but I think I can reduce your overall number of elementary schools. I'm certain I can. But it would take a plan that would be approved by you, but if you added a high school of that size, an elementary school of that size, there would be an elementary school in Columbia that would no longer be a functioning elementary school. At least one, if not two. So, I'll pull that policy up. If it's been misspoken, it was at my misspeaking on that.
We can always change the policy. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem if we wanted to go to 1,000, but that wasn't what was recommended by instruction, I don't think, before, was to go that high. I'm just throwing that out there. The other thing is, with Central, we did save money, but I think it's important for board to remember that money was returned to the commission. It was not kept here to add to things that could be done throughout the county, or specifically for Central, where they did not have athletic facilities taken care of, and still don't have athletic facilities up to the standards that we set. So, I'm just, we've spent a lot of money at Battle Creek on athletic facilities, because that wasn't part of the budget, and we had extra money. And so I'm glad that that's included in this, but I just want to make it very clear, the last time we went through this process, it was this board's decision, not mine, but it was this board's decision to give that money back to the commission. And I would hope that we could make sure that we find a way to, make things more equitable across the county for, other places south of that particular area.
And I will say, there's too many on this. Go ahead. That's our plan. And that's why I mentioned to you on the front end is that the order is the high school, the elementary school, the gym, and beyond as we go back. We've worked with Doug, and we believe, and Doug, you tell me if I'm stating this incorrectly, that once the money is given to you, there can't be a stipulation that says you have to give it back. Now, they can say it, but legally, once they give it to you, it's yours. So any money that would be left over would be at this board's discretion on how to spend and move forward in other areas.
That's true, but I think at the time we had a really crappy budgeting process that we did, and so when we didn't have money, we had to give money back to cover that part of it. So as long as we're not gonna have a crappy budgeting process and we can keep that money, that's beneficial, but that's not what we had at that time.
And I will say the updated 3.211, I believe we did this in November, is expansion of an elementary school is up to is minimum of 700. A new elementary school is 850 to a maximum of 1,000. A middle school expansion is minimum of 850. A new middle school is minimum of 1,000 with a maximum of 1,400. A high school, either expansion or new high school, is a minimum of 1,400 with a maximum of 2,000. So we worked on the 1,000 number up to 1,000. We would be, if depending on whether you consider this a new or an expanded, a minimum of 850 if we say this is a new elementary facility. If you said this is an existing facility, then it would be 700. But we worked off of the numbers of 850 to 1,000 and giving them the number of rooms and things that we would need. And we did just speak this week. She's been working with TSBA because we had about a 3-month lull where policies that you approved did not get updated. I don't know. They just didn't, but she's working to fix it.
I can answer that. One, we did submit some, and they, for whatever reason, just didn't get them up, but there are also some were not submitted, and we found out since then. So we have made sure to go back and capture those and make sure they are submitted now. And that was from, the person responsible to submit was a former employee that's no longer here.
Mr. Chairman, sensitive to your time on a Sunday afternoon, there's one other thing I want to say. We didn't just look at the options as I presented them to you and square footage and student population. We also looked at other factors, and I'll just give you one example, a big one, and that is there is a life, health, safety issue with traffic control at Spring Hill High School where it sits now on Highway 31. And if you pump the population up of teenagers driving cars, 400 to 600 more, you've really made a lot worse situation. The plan we recommended was based also on the fact that you will minimize that with it being an elementary school and shifting that problem, so.
All right, Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you. To go with what Ms. Parker said, I think over the process of Central High School, Battle Creek, I think we've learned some lessons. There's been mistakes made by this board and other people too, so I agree. As a person who agreed to send the money back that time, different situations this time, I would not be doing that again. And I think it wouldn't have mattered. It's also a different setting too. But that said, we've got, for those that are new at the process here of what Hewlett Spencer will be bringing us, I would have to assume, and I'm not going to ask you to speak to this because I know in the past we've called you up to the table and said, hey, give us a rough number on a high school. And I know that's a very uncomfortable position because in my own line of work, I'm going to give you a pretty high number if I'm calling in cold and I'm just having to do it. I'm going to give you a number that I'm very comfortable that I could absolutely 100% make. The next layer below that is where I've actually done my research and done my numbers and worked on what the actual numbers are and really have been able to hammer them out and get them down to that GMP or a guaranteed price. So my assumption is when we're given an $80 million price, which to be fair sounds very high to me as well. My assumption is that when we get to a GMP, when we get to an actual working number, it's going to have to be less than that. Now, I just say that for discussion point here that understanding that that doesn't mean we're going to come back, and I think this board has made it very clear that even if we were approved for $80 million for these two buildings, my expectation is that we're doing it cheaper than that on the beginning. And I do appreciate, Mr. Perrin, that the discussion this time around, again, lessons learned, is that we're not just including the Battle Creek schools or these things. It's that if whatever dollar amount we get, we are stretching it as far as possible. And personally, I think if you look at the MG requests we've done and how we've made that work previously, is a much better approach for us. I think we have proven that we have stretched dollars very far, and at least we can know what the top list is, and made sure that we keep that money going with whatever we have. So I just want to point that out, that when we see an $85 million ask, I would have to assume at some point in these discussions, as the pencils get really sharpened, that looks at like a better number, and we actually could do more, a lot more potentially with that money, and really do some of these other needs potentially that are pretty high. Some of the sports facility needs, some of those other things, is where I would be looking at where we to get that money.
And I will say, if you look at the tab where I broke this down, I think it's important to remember that, and I gave, and look, this is always your number, okay? I gave you $85 million. One, we're not asking them to separately fund plans. We would be going with them and having the conversations with them to say, we're asking for this amount of money, and we guarantee to you that we're going to spend this amount of money on Maury County schools. Our first priority is a high school with athletic facilities. The second priority would be to convert that current Spring Hill High School plant into something other than it is, with the elementary school being the primary use. Anything beyond that, and we've had internal discussions of the Northfield Academy could go there, there could be teacher training rooms, we could convert And we're not making decisions for you, but we talked about converting that band room into a boardroom. We talked about all types of things that would be possibilities that we would not make a decision on, that we would come back to you, at that point. But what we would tell the commission is that we're gonna move forward with this being an elementary school and make that happen. The Santa Fe gym is the third option on there. Those three things take four of the 6 items that I gave to you on a 5-year building plan off of the board. Those three. We feel there may be money left. We think there would be money left, and we picked Mount Pleasant Elementary School kinda just out of our discussion of coming off of Dr. Register's report several years ago. It's just been left alone for some things. Now, we've done some window work, we've done some chiller work, but there was a kind of a little window there in the last 5 years where we kinda thought maybe it would go away. You know, it might, there was a time in which we talked about it being the big need. But to come into a school like that, we know it needs floor work, we know it needs cabinetry work, we need to go in and to go into an elementary school, whether it be that one or any other one, or if you guys would prefer to go to an athletic facility, and to stretch that money out as far as we can, because the length of the list of things that we know we need for all schools is very lengthy. Unfortunately, we talk about new schools because, we hit a point where sometimes we don't fit and we gotta have something. We know Joseph Brown needs attention, we know Mount Pleasant Elementary needs attention. That's what we're working through with the request of maintenance. But if you said to them, and you may say, no, Eric, I don't like that idea at all, I'm saying a flat amount of money, we're gonna do the planning in it, we're gonna do these 2 conversions, absolutely, the Santa Fe gym should happen, and beyond that, we're putting it in your buildings, and we're putting it across the district. We're coming south with that money at that point. City of Spring Hill would be affected, City of Columbia would be impacted. If you went to Mount Pleasant would be impacted. County would be impacted with the gym need at Santa Fe. And I'll tell you, 23 years ago when I walked into Murray County, they were screaming, we need a gym at Santa Fe. That's up beyond the Battle Creek property proposal for me. And you may say you don't like it, but that was my thought process in saying, this isn't just promising you we're gonna do this at Central and we hope to give you some money back. This is saying, we're putting this amount of money into the school system. But the primary thing would be those top 2 needs. We need an elementary.
And if I could just clarify one thing with that, this pretty much cleans off, were it to be approved, our 5-year facilities list.
It gets 4 of the 6.
Okay. And one dropped off because of the switchover.
Well, the 2 that would be left was we did have Culleoka on
Okay.
there, and we figured that would be more towards the back end of the
Okay.
5-year. The second thing would be any decision you guys made, concerning 5th grade.
Okay.
And if you made that decision, if you didn't, if you took that off of the table, then this gets 4 of the 5. If you leave that on the table, then we would have to figure out facility needs for
All right,
5th
thank you.
grade.
All right, well, I'm gonna jump in front of you, Mr. Howell. Mr. Laconin, just by a quick look, or you can look while Mr. Howell's asking his question, are there any school-related borrowings that are gonna roll off of the debt schedule in the coming 5 years, maybe?
We just had one roll off, so our cost on the 141 budget for a shared borrowing here went down about $100,000. So there is a little bit, it just depends on how the commission decides to budget for the debt service fund, whether capacity will be freed up or not.
You mentioned 5th grade, and that's exactly what I've been waiting this entire time. You mentioned earlier that we would, if we were able to do a 1,000-student school at Spring Hill High School, elementary school, that conversion, that we would be able to close some schools. I'm more concerned with, before we start closing schools, getting 5th grade moved back to elementary school. Could we do, are you saying we can do both of those, or one of those, or what? 'Cause if we're spending $85 million and we can get another thing checked off.
We can repurpose 2 schools. I didn't say close because I don't think we have any I don't think we have any facilities that are in the McDowell shape right now to where we would be willing to just leave.
Right.
They could be converted, they might not be a current K-4. And you guys know we talked that morning about preschools and different types of things, and those type of things. So direction would come at that point, and that's why I said I don't make a promise on anything. We could look at greatly changing what elementary schools, that may be a better way to say it. And if you said, hey, we wanna work fifth grade into this as an option, then that would become the focus more so than repurposing them for a special use or something like that. I'll say it, there's no use in hiding it. We know that per your policy, if a school couldn't eventually be expanded up to 750, then it's probably got a short life ahead of you, and our two in Columbia or Riverside and Highland. They have a capacity of about 800 and something students. If you look at the fifth grade population in Columbia, it's probably not 800 and something students. I don't have that number in front of me, but it's probably not there. So we would take direction from you as we move forward. The other thing to think about is this. You have to have that high school built before you repurpose Spring Hill High School. You know, it's not gonna all happen at the same time, because there would be bathrooms that have to be built. There would be different things. So there's a lag time on the elementary school. The window in which it would take to fund, build, and convert, I don't wanna predict what that north side of the county is gonna look like. I've said this for 3 years. Port Royal Corridor, National Highway Corridor are ridiculous on what's being planned for them and what's going on. If you've been on the other side of the interstate at Bear Creek, they're clearing 110 acres right there that's commercial and manufacturing land. What does that do to that exit? That's not what that is where we start the north side of the county, and what does it bring home-wise? So it's hard to say right now that elementary school could absorb all of the fifth grade. Today, it could. By the time we get a high school built and an elementary school built and we go through a zoning process, might be a little bit harder. But it wouldn't be something that I would kick off the table today by any stretch of the imagination.
And so also we're only gonna use half that building for an elementary school, or roughly.
We would use a good portion of the classrooms.
Right.
We know, lower A and lower B hall, and if you're familiar with it, Spring Hill is just 3 halls primarily. It's a cross hall and 2 huge kind of Fs that come off of it. The front hall is A, so lower A, lower B, the library, the current office suite, the cafeteria. Those things would not take a ton of modification. As you move up in that number, as you say, we wanna go to 1,000, probably upper A and upper B become part of it, but that leaves E Hall, G building, your band room. We think we could function the auxiliary gym as the gym. That leaves the entire gym, and Spring Hill High School has our whole gym complex. It's the biggest one in the county. So it leaves B building. There's a lot of space up there that we don't think we would push into. I wouldn't say half of the classroom setting, but a good portion of the building would not be tied up in an elementary school.
Right. Well, the other thing is, I definitely understand the fair and equitableness of athletic fields. However, with that being said, I mean, I'm from Culleoka. We would dream of having anything Columbia Central plays on. It'd just be a pipe dream, really. But, you know, I do understand too that at Battle Creek, we were facing a field, which, don't get me wrong, our soccer field was a field that parents graded, and it actually turns out pretty well. It actually drains pretty well. But, we did turn money back from Central, and you know, but they do have fields, and they have pretty nice fields. Do they have enough? No, they don't. I agree with that. But starting from scratch, there was nothing there, and so I do understand why we have to put money into that, and I don't have any problem with that. But we do now have a plan, where we didn't have a plan before. We didn't have a athletic facility plan. We didn't have a standard. So we do have a standard now that we can work from and hopefully get towards where we need to go.
And one of the things One of the things, and this, again, just as a side note, that I spoke to you about on that Saturday morning, is that moving forward, kinda like you did with your athletic plan, and these are the minimum standards, what we would like to do is, as we build the next building, we come up with, what does Murray County put in an elementary school? What does Murray County put in a high school? And then at some point, I'm not saying immediately, you do what these larger counties have had to do around us, to where, I'll give you the example. Williamson was building new buildings, and I know we don't like to talk about them, but they build lots of buildings. They were building new buildings, and they were giving high schools and middle schools certain facilities that existing schools didn't have. And they went back and they gave every existing school a comparable facility. You know, they didn't have auditorium at Centennial High School, but the new high schools had auditorium, so they built an auditorium. They gave them the same thing. We're not at that point, because right now we're still recovering from lots of things we're deficient on. We know that, just maintenance-wise. But I think at some point, what we would like to see, just like an athletic minimum, is that you build that standard and you say, we're gonna come back into these other areas that maybe aren't seeing the same amount of growth, and we're gonna do that. And I'm gonna tell you, we talk about this all the time, you drive around Columbia right now, the neighborhoods in Columbia are changing substantially. And we find out every August where kids are. When we run that school bus the first day, we go, 3 years ago, we went in behind Columbia State, and we picked up 3 times as many kids as we were anticipating. And we said, whoa, we've got to make an adjustment, because this population of Columbia has made an adjustment. And that's just something that we're gonna battle constantly, but it does lead back to, I know we're spending a lot up north, but that's where we're seeing a lot of the immediate need. We just have to convince everybody else that the people everywhere else need that need as well.
Mr. Sims.
Random question. Is there a number, formula, anything that y'all go on based on if, say, 100 new houses are being built, there will be estimated 30 kids come out of those, or, I mean, is there some special formula that
We have the formulas
predict?
that, we do. We have formulas that we came from with Dr. Register. This is what we're seeing, though. And yes, there is. So there's the first answer to your question, but here's the variable that we're seeing. If you notice, the types of housing that's being built in Murray County is changing dramatically. Take Taylor's Landing that's, by the Farm Bureau office behind the Northside Kroger. We've never seen a neighborhood like that in Columbia. So if you count just the number of dwellings, what we've always historically worked on were single-family homes that had a yard and a driveway, and, you know, you moved into it, your kids had a place in the back. And we're seeing dwellings now that don't necessarily have some of the amenities that folks in this community have been used to. So we're having a harder time determining how many kids live in an equal amount of dwellings there in Columbia as compared to they do houses. Now, and it's just because we have a different population, we're seeing those types of things for the first time. We don't pick a lot of kids up at the condos at Graymere, and they've been there 30 years, but we're picking them up at condominiums in Spring Hill because it's a different resident. So yes, we have that. We have and it applies to single-family homes, it applies to condominiums, it applies to apartments. What we're seeing, especially Columbia North, are these mixed-use developments where you come in and you have this many single-family homes, you have this many condos, you have an apartment complex in the middle of the thing. And that's just something that we're really kind of working through. What does that look like? The other thing that you take into account is the Southern Springs community in Spring Hill, which is 800 homes. When they're done, there's not a kid in it. Which is great, by the way, because it's all property dollars and we don't serve anything in there. So you're getting money out of it, but we're not. But those types of things really factor into that number. We do have a number, but what we constantly have to do is go back and look at what did it really look like. And we're seeing that even the same types of dwellings in Spring Hill may get a whole different ratio of kids than in Columbia, just because Columbia's never had anything like that. It's a new way of living in a different community, so.
I just wanted to comment, on Mr. Howe's statement about not having the standards. We also didn't have a countywide athletic director at that time either. So along with him came those standards. What I'm saying is, even though we didn't have those standards at the time, we have them now. We know what they are. And we're talking about a 5A school. I mean, we're not talking about a 1A school. We're not talking about a 2A school. And that's no slight to them, but what I'm saying is those kids have to go and they have to compete against schools across the county line that do have all of the amenities. And we're not giving them an equal playing field. That's all I'm saying.
And if I could go to comment to Mr. Sims, what you had said about that. One thing I've noticed in Spring Hill, which you guys could probably back up, with the nature of the change in housing, you're also seeing a lot of more changes. So you may start the year with, for example, 2 elementary school kids in that one apartment or duplex, and by the time the school ends, there's 2 high school kids living in that one. The shifting of those populations, which has got to be a nightmare for you guys to manage, and it makes it more difficult. The transiency, I guess, is they're moving around, and that's, if you could speak to that, that makes it hard for planning. I know it does.
Two things. When Grand Reserve Apartments that are off of Tom Williams up there, off of Ray Williams, off of Reserve Boulevard up there, we ended the school year picking up 2 middle school students in May, and the first morning the middle school bus stopped in August. We picked up almost 30 kids out of that one apartment complex, and we didn't see that. That number has gone up and down since then. The other thing is this, and I don't know unless you live at Spring Hill how many people know this. There's probably a quarter of the new homes in Spring Hill that are owned by rental companies. They are not homes that people live. I mean, they roll over every 6 to 18 months on who's there, and I'm talking in some cases $250,000, $300,000 homes that are owned by corporations that they're just forever going to be a rental home. Because Spring Hill, in lots of ways, has become a suitcase town for Franklin and Murfreesboro. That's changing as it grows and more things are there. But it's been really hard to predict in some cases anything that's not the traditional single-family home, because historically we're at that cusp that Williamson and Rutherford were probably at 20 to 25 years ago, where we're going from that. They know what a new condominium complex is going to do to their neighborhoods, but that's a long time after the first one was built. And that's where we struggle, is that rollover, and there is a lot of rollover. I drove a bus the first 6 weeks of school, and I guarantee you if I drive that route tomorrow, or we won't go to school tomorrow, if we drove that route Tuesday, same route, it would be a great variance, probably between a 10 to 20% variance on the kids that get on it. Not just the number of kids, but even if you kept the same number, it's just different kids.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think we've about talked this one through pretty thoroughly. I guess the question I would ask for the board is, do we want to present the 97,583 number to the county commission as our capital request?
I will say we presented 93 last year and got $1 million. So, I'm all for presenting. I don't know what they'll do with it, but.
That's what we're here for today. We want to decide as a board, is this what we want to present? Do we want to take the 85 out, present the others? Do we want to present $15? Mr. Howe?
Since I've been on this board, we have asked for a new elementary school and a new high school the whole time. I feel that if you take them off and you say, nah, we really don't need them, then we're starting all over with the need for what we need. I think we should ask for what we need any and every year, whether there's any chance that we're going to get it or not. We did last year. We knew there was no chance, and we asked. So I think we should definitely ask for what we need, not what we want, but what we need every year, whether we get it or not. At least they still know that we were serious, that we still need to build some buildings. We've just changed them around a little bit. It's no longer McDowell. It is a new school on the north side of Columbia. So we're presenting them the option that this is something we still need. Once again, if we just say, just kidding, we didn't really need them after all, and then we hit them with it again next year, well, you didn't ask for it last year, why do you, we need it.
Yeah.
So we need to
Okay.
ask.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Eric, if you could, just briefly, the high school, the money approved this year, the high school will be roughly, 3 years out? A new high school?
Time the money would be approved, depending on the total budget, would be somewhere between July and October. And then I would defer to these gentlemen as to once they
Just
got
ballpark
approval
numbers.
to go.
We've got to develop. Something that hasn't been mentioned is called the program, and that's what you want the school to do for the children. And so you've got program development, architectural work, and so on. When you do that, we could build that school, once all those things are done and everything's approved, in less than 2 years, 18 to 20 months. And of course, that depends on the weather, but 18 to 20 months, and then, so from right here, we're talking about August of 21, so 22, 23 would be a push. That would be tough.
So realistically,
More likely
2024. Okay, I mean, that's helpful. So then, again, since this would be a tiered program, we would have to build a new high school before we could start on the elementary school, based on that. So then we're talking assuming we spent some time on the front end planning for what that would look like, another 18 months from there?
I don't think the high school would take
Or a year.
18 months, do you? I think that,
10 months,
Okay.
10 months to a year.
So,
me, if we
I
walk
think
that-
that's close enough on that. So we're talking 2024 and 2025, and I think that's important when we talk about asking for this money, that this is not next year money, these are problems that are already here, that are building and building and building, so that this would only be a solution that would be coming into place in 2024 and 2025. And to be fair, looking at the numbers we've got for the issues of space at Spring Hill High School and our elementary school space at other schools, we're likely going to have discussions about how to resolve some of those, which could include things like portables or making other adjustments. And again, that does not include what the board has talked about with moving fifth grade. That doesn't even get into that whole issue. So I say that I think it's important that, as I've always felt, if we as a board, we're here to decide what the needs of the school system are, and if we are in agreement that these are the needs we have, then we need to ask for it, regardless of what we think the county commission may or may not approve, because, again, that's their job. Our job is to determine needs, and if we agree they're needs, and frankly, there may be more discussion on whether these are actually what our needs are, and the rest of the board we can talk about that. But once we determine that, I think we are obligated to ask for that amount of money.
Okay, are we good to take this under advisement and send this as our capital request? Consensus? I'm not ready to send it yet. Well, no, I'm just saying, as part of the discussion moving forward. Doug, phrase it for me the right way, please.
We're just all going to take it into consideration.
No, it's not going anywhere yet. We hadn't voted on it.
Make me nervous.
Sorry about that. All right, well, let's move forward then with the next item. Operations budget.
Thank you.
So, as we transition, I wanna point something out first, and if I can get to the right sheet, I have several open. You wanna take a break?
Let's take a 5-minute break. Everybody else has been very patient. I was thinking about it. My blood pressure medicine, if I drink any water, I'm gonna be going back and forth. The only way I stay focused is eating is drinking water, right? I'm shot either way. It is for sure. I think we ought to build a multi-use retractable dome stadium in Holyoke, Tennessee. That's what I appreciate the sentiment, but. That's what I'm gonna propose, just for soccer. Yeah. We used to have to get out of school early
run with a tractor and a hot plate.
do pretty good at it.
I mean, really. Looking at that? Yeah. I spent a long night with my dad trying to tell me what exactly budget, like, these don't look like budget.
I was gonna say, it's not the household budget.
No, these are not the budgets I'm used to seeing in Texas.
Yeah.
But luckily, I know somebody who at least can tell me what they mean.
Yeah, and that's always good, 'cause I mean, first couple of years I was on the county commission, I had to just listen to find out what was actually going on.
And I feel terrible.
No, it really was, probably my last year on the commission that I felt confident enough to even talk about it, 'cause it is a definite learning process.
Yeah, it just makes me feel bad considering, like I think I know what's going on, but I'm not thinking.
Somebody told me that the county commission group that was elected before ours, they were told by some of the older members, for the first year, don't say anything in any meeting. Keep it quiet, because you don't know what you're talking about. And that obviously was bad advice, but that's how steep the learning curve can be, is to not be intimidated. Or it's normal to be intimidated, I guess, is the thing. Yeah, it is, there's no doubt.
For some reason, it just feels different than all of the other meetings and competitions and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
I feel pretty good about this one. Hopefully.
We're getting there.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it.
I came prepared, I brought my.
Well, I knew I was on camera, so I had to judge how often I got up. I knew you all were deep in conversation, so I wanted to wait.
Thank you.
It might be, just, we'll bring that up and discuss what the best solution to that is. Yeah, yeah,
Everybody saying well?
no. All right, let's gather back together.
So, first I would like to say, I would like to thank Doug and Schiffer the way they've operated through employees this year in the 1 and 200 lines of our budgets, because we have a better analysis of what it's really actually gonna cost for next year. It benefited my departments because I saw payroll and some of the benefits drop over some of the estimations that we've had in the past. The budgets that I wanna talk to you today about: 72250 technology, 72610 operations, 72620 maintenance, 72710 transportation, and 71900 safety. Last year had a total budget of $19,332,557.26. This year's budget came in at $19,661,669. Across those budgets, those 5 budgets, that's an increase of $329,111.74. $327,000 of that $329 is simply asking to take my utility budgets back to where they were before we cut them last year, so that if we operate next year on a full schedule, in which we are in buildings every day, and we see wear and tear, and we see water use. So basically, across those budgets, I just wanna point out on the front end, we would be asking and adding already within those numbers 2 maintenance men that would be dedicated to outside. They would form along with our current ground person, our ground crew, and 2 additional tech people. One would be a student data manager to add a second one. The other would be just a tech to work on the devices that we've added, of course, the year. Those are figured into the number that I just gave you. So with those 4 positions added in and utility ask going back to where it was before we cut it in the spring, we're up $329,000. Like I said, 327.5 of that is utility costs. We can go through each one, and I'll start with whichever one you want and go through them. I just thought on the front end you might like that information.
Thank you. Is there anything in particular preference for a start?
Okay, we'll start with technology first. Technology budget this year, the proposal that I've worked through with Tommy, actually would be lowering the technology budget by $81,293. That would be working through costs that he has on internet and many of the provided services that we have. Not shown in his budget would be $400,000 that is in 72180, that would be the match for his E-rate, right, a grant that he spoke to you about the other night, in which we would get 2.2 million. The deal on that is we would have to match 20%, which is 440. That is not represented in technology, but rather 72180. But outside of that, this would be adding a second data manager and a second IT person, and it still does go down. You see cost reductions in internet connectivity and in other contract services. And then the remainder of the cost reductions, even in adding positions, is just from where we were overestimating costs for employees. Any questions about technology? 72610 operating budget has an increase, a total increase, let me pull down here, of $415,000. $327,000 of that is in taking those utility costs back to where they should be and growing at the standard rate, so they are back to where they would be. We also saw change in some contracts on alarm monitoring. We've seen some changes with waste management due to the county and the position that they've been in with the landfill. We've got some up cost on that. But most of this budget is as is. The only things that we've asked for in operations and in any budget is the actual cost of our current agreements as they move forward, plus the energy cost to return. So in that, basically energy costs and actual cost of what we're spending to do away with different things. I will say I had a request, and I told them I would present this. I have said no on the front end, but you tell me if it was my place to say no. We have contractual obligations with both ABM and HES at set prices that they bid out for 5 years. ABM came back with a 2.5% ask on increase, which comes out to, let me make sure I'm giving you the exact number here. They asked for an increase of $28,443 on their contract, bringing it to $1.166 million. They said that was due to rising cost of employees. That was SMS. HES gave us a credit, and our bill with them will go down this year $51,329 from removing McDowell from their service. They then made the request, and I said no. Again, you tell me if this was my place or not. They asked for a 14% increase over cost, bringing, even with that $51,000 coming out, with the $51,000 coming out, they asked for a 9.6% increase. However, it would be 14% over where it was last year. They asked for an increase of $129,604. So I told them I did not see that was doable since their contract held them to a number. Now, they could come back to us later and say that they wish to withdraw from their contract. However, the contract for both companies is written that the only price change could be is if we added or amended our services. If we asked them to do more things than they're currently doing, or if we added more square footage to them, would be the only ask that they have. But both did ask for something again. SMS a 2.5% increase, HES a 14% increase. So I just told them that I would present that to you. If you tell me you would rather stay with their contractual number and move forward, that is the number that's in the budget. And McDowell does remove $51,000. Let me get you a hard number on that. $51,329 from cleaning services. Anything on operations, questions wise? 72620 is maintenance. That budget did increase by $94,000. You see the offset when I tell you I only am going up 329 is because the transportation and the technology budgets did go down. The maintenance budget did rise in its actual cost. We are not asking for anything other than we have an increase on cost on sprinkler system monitoring. We have a 5-year test this year, and everything else within the budget, is actual cost. We've had some inspections that have gone up, some certificates that have gone up on what they cost, over the course of all of their lines, and adding the 2 maintenance men that I mentioned to you increases their budget $94,391. Again, that comes back as part of the larger of my 5 budgets that we're only up the 329. Any questions about maintenance?
Sorry, this isn't about maintenance. I just realized that this document doesn't total each department for you. I'll make sure that's on the next one.
And I got a handy dandy one, it's my cheat sheet if you'd rather have it. It's a little bit, I'm working off of, the other one's too big and moves too much for me, but I've got that there. Transportation, the budget actually goes down $11,422. We are asking for no change across that budget. The 11,000 comes in from him actually correcting our salaries and benefits and getting an actual number for our employees. It does, we along, like Mr. Parkhurst, we have around 20 open positions this year. That is simply because, and I think I've spoken to you in the past, the age of the transportation staff is an upper 60s on average, and COVID has just been so hard this year. We've had so many people that have just said, I can't put myself at risk, and we've had to absorb positions like that. We didn't do away with them, we just haven't rehired. This would be assuming that we would be back to full staff next year and that we would need everybody to run every day the way that we have. I will tell you, if we hadn't have had the pivots and the different closures across the district with over the course of the year, transportation would have been in a horrible place just making ends meet, because we're pulling everybody we can and they're still short. So while this budget goes down, this is a status quo budget. It does drop 11,000 over the course of the budget, though, simply because of the way that they calculated employees this year. I will say too, the maintenance budget, going back to that one, does include our summer paint crew. They will be painting Riverside this year. Obviously, June is funded in this year's budget. This would fund July, which would be Riverside, and then it would fund the June of the next year when we move probably to Highland. But I know that that's included in there as well. Any questions over transportation? Yes, ma'am.
Again, with the reduction for McDowell, are there any savings there, bus routes that get eliminated?
No. No, they still, that is our, McDowell is our highest percentage of riders for an elementary school, and on average, we're moving them to schools that are further from their homes than closer. So I only expect that to go up as far as the average. Now, I don't expect us to have to add routes because of it, but I do expect that ridership up for that current zone may increase, because kids that could get to McDowell now are gonna be going to Highland, they're gonna be going to Riverside, they're gonna be going to Baker, they're gonna be going to Woodard. So you've got a greater distance with Woodard and probably with Riverside in some cases, and you have a main thoroughfare to every one of them. It's not a walk zone. You can't walk to Highland because of the railroad tracks and kind of what's going on. You can't cross 31 to get to Riverside. The same thing with, so I don't see a reduction in bus staff. Any reduction that you would see, we did not add last year. And in fact, we took Hampshire from 4 buses to 3 this year. We combined an elementary along with a middle school and high school route out Bear Creek just out of necessity. Those are things we think we can continue to do. But as we come back to a full ridership, both in Columbia and in Spring Hill, we think that if you reduced 1 or 2 drivers, it would add there. It's kind of a wash. McDowell right now, I think, is served by 5 big buses and 2 or 3 sped buses, and that is that's the same number of buses that Marvin Wright has. And you look at the size of the Marvin Wright zone and there's that many more kids, and it's just because ridership at McDowell's so high. I do have some cost savings on McDowell. If I can get to the right document, we know that Columbia Power, that bill this year was $46,000, and I can send these numbers to you guys in a spreadsheet if you want them. I know what the gas cost, Provincia cost. I know what the costs that are gonna go away are, and my list comes to around $137,000 that just go away. That's not cost that would be shifted to another school. This is just cost that costs us $1,000 a year to keep the Navigate program intact. We won't need it. That just is $1,000 that goes away. The $6,000 to mow, that goes away. It doesn't pick up anywhere. So $137 in utility and that type of cost is just dead, goes away. But then cost that transfers to other buildings was not figured into that. But I can send those numbers to you. Well, any questions about transportation?
Are you adding any buses? I mean, I know last year we were supposed to get 12 and we only got 6, so we're gonna get those 6 now and...
We are looking at, and we were trying to get through the end of March. I do think because we've parked so much this year, I have, and Mr. Pinkston's been pretty diligent about this, we have, I think, enough money in fuel and in tire costs this year that probably in May, into June, we're gonna come back and ask you to spend this year's funds to purchase 2 buses that would offset. That's not anything the commission would have to be involved with other than just approving it, not asking money for them. That would get us up to the 8, and we would only be, it would get us closer to where we are. And then the 12 next year would help offset. So if we can, and I wanted to get through March completely, to see what the spring would bring. One thing that has benefited as well, it's hurt the employees at transportation, but it's benefited the system, is we normally run around 800 to 900 field trips a year, and that's athletics, that's the gamut of you gotta get somewhere, and we have run minimal. I mean, a lot of our sports teams haven't even taken them. So we've had folks that didn't get a lot of pay. Now, that pay is not county pay, very much on a minimum, because schools reimburse us. If Central decides they wanna take 4 buses or 6 buses to a football team game, they reimburse that. But we've had a lot of employees that have lost a lot of work this year for that. But from a system point of view, we haven't had wear and tear on those buses. We haven't had fuel costs that, you know, even though it's reimbursed, we didn't pay it on the front end and then have to wait for it to come back. So I'm not planning on adding anything new. And in fact, actually, we absorbed 3 routes this year. Those 3 routes would be able to be shifted next year to where they need to be. And that's transportation. Any other questions? 71900, primarily, if you look at that $278,950, $229,950 of that is funded from the Safe Schools grant, and that is guaranteed minimum. It may rise, and it has risen each of the last 6 years, but that is what we're guaranteed next year. The only other cost that's in that safety budget, and let me say, we worked with Doug this year and Schifra to move this into its own category. When I was the supervisor of transportation and safety, they put all safety money into transportation because I was managing all of it. Now, since we have a safety person and a transportation person, we had asked for this to be separated out so that 2 people weren't living in the same pot of money, and so that we would have a better cost of what we're doing safety-wise. So you have the $229,950 that comes from the Safe Schools grant. That could come in higher, but that is the minimum. We spend $16,000 on Raptor. Raptor is the system that when you go into a school and they ask you for your ID and they run it through, it does a background check on you at that point. And we use that as a visitor system for all schools. $23,000 is Navigate Prepared. That is an internal system that we can share with local police departments and fire departments, where we house all of our safety information about our schools. It houses our plans. There are 4 plans for our buildings, in which you click on it, and it doesn't show you alive, but we've gone into every room and taken a 360 of that room. So if the CPD needed to see what a room looks like before they go in, we can click on them and show them how that room looks. That is for each of our buildings. The other thing this does is it keeps our drill data in actual time, so that if the state wants any of our drill information, they can just look in and see it from their end. And then the last would be, again, and when we introduced the K-9 to you a couple of weeks ago, we said that the original plan with the Sheriff's Department was to purchase a second one. The 10,000 would be for that. That is a reoccurring cost. We were actually paying, Interquest, the company that we were contracted to, $12,500 per year, so we've lowered that, but that's total safety budget is $278,950, again, with $229,000 of it being reimbursed by the state. So, any questions about that? That is the gamut of the operations budgets. Again, that is two additional maintenance men, and let me expand on that a little bit. They would be a grounds crew that we would double to work on athletic facilities to try to meet those minimum standards. We're not to the point where we could say all they're gonna do is work on fields and athletic facilities at this point, but they would work on our playgrounds, they would keep our trees trimmed, they would do lots of the cleanup, they would come in and do anything that's outside would be their primary responsibility, but they would work towards working on our athletics as well. With those, with the additional tech for IT and the second student data manager in there, that brings those 5 budgets up $329,000.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this? Okay. Guess the next thing on our list is the administrative pay schedule. Pay scale.
So this item is just simply a request of if the board wants this factored into the superintendent's request. I'll go ahead and defer to Michael on this one, so.
We'd spoke about this earlier in the year, looking at another means as to compensate our administrators. I introduced 2 different possible pay scales. The board felt that they liked the one that I've presented today back to you as the one they wanted. So we are now presenting it again. Pretty much, you know, just on the quick numbers, what we're showing is with the assistant principal pay scale, we're only gonna be bumping the numbers around about 160 to 170 more than what they are making now. And due to the reduction of one principal, it's really going to be almost a wash on the difference there for principal. So just wanted to bring this one back up to you guys to see if this is the pay scale of your choice.
Any discussion on this? We're not voting on it today, so. Bring it up to work session?
Well, I just think we need to know what the actual impact is on the budget before we can really move forward. And I think we had discussions too about potentially looking at our teacher salary scale as well. So, I mean, I would like to see those things done hand in hand. I don't know that we just wanna bump up administrators and leave teachers out and looking at theirs. That's just my thought.
Have we looked at the impact of, I know there were some performance increases, what was the annual amount we would be budgeting for that? I know we'd be on the front end of this, so it's kind of one of those things that would take a couple of years to get into place. But what would you guys be looking at to budget for that amount?
What I'd hope to budget is looking at making sure that we're doing the level 5. I'd want to say, to be safe, we'd want to make sure we do that for the total amount of administrators and assistant principals, and as well as the central office positions of the $500 increase, just to be conservative, to make sure we are budgeting enough. Just go ahead and budget that they'll all be that number.
The assumption that everybody would hit that level 5.
Correct.
All right.
Mr. Fulbright? Can I just say, I think that's probably a little unrealistic with where we are as a district. So, I don't really know that I would be in favor of budgeting that much at this point. That's very idealistic.
It is, it may be unrealistic, but, you're talking about, I think it'll be 22 administrators, and I believe it was 16, get that number for you. I'm sorry, and 27 assistant principals. So,
So that's not included in the current budget that you have that shows deficit.
correct.
Okay.
And that would be,
So would
come
you
out to
be,
$43,000 to budget for that.
and 43,000 is not that much in the grand scheme of things, but, I mean, I would want you to find that money in your budget from, I mean, we're already at a deficit, so I don't wanna just add to that deficit, would be where I would be coming from on that.
And, you know, one of the things where it'd be cost savings is it takes out the step raises where we're automatically bumping those up every year, which I can try to do a cost analysis and see what the differential is there.
And I guess that kinda gets to the point. I mean, I know if you skip to the last page and you look at the significant deficit we're looking at on this, I mean, and frankly, just $40-something thousand or just $20-something thousand, I think we're at the point where we have to look at every one of those, and I'm not sure it would be responsible to approve I mean, even though I know we discussed this and the changes look nice, and I think they are moving the correct direction in terms of parity and trying to create a system that is fair moving ahead. But, I mean, again, looking at the numbers, I'm not sure we're able to do that, if we're looking at this. So, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I'm still not sure what to do with it, but, that's what it is right now.
I will say too, I think we could look at this, but we need to look at it in regards to the org chart, because we need to know how many, specialists, who's gonna be a specialist, who's gonna be a coordinator, who's gonna be a supervisor, directors, all those, how that changes, and what I mean, one thing that I think we had said is that we did not wanna adopt this with the idea that we were gonna be giving a bunch of administrators a huge raise. So we kinda need to know who falls where on that org chart, where they're gonna fall under this, so we can really dive into whether or not this is something we could do this year, I think.
So you said that it's the 43,000 is what would raise that within the budget? Raise the budget deficit, that amount? Did I hear that number? I'm reading this and trying to listen, and I'm just not doing a very good job at either one.
No, the 43,000 would be the anticipated pay, raises every year if we say everybody was gonna be LOE 5. What we're
Okay.
looking at is in the assistant principal position, that's where the biggest bump would be, and I'm looking at around about 160,000, and the principals would be, due to the reduction of one principal, it's gonna be just about a wash.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think you're getting faster than my button. And just as a reminder on this, a couple of things. This would, even if we adopted this scale, again, was there a grandfathering option on this too? So have you guys accounted for that budgeting wise? Is that, do you have any idea who's gonna opt into this, opt out of this?
Correct. First of all, we would allow for the grandfathering in, and most of those are your high and about to retire folks anyway, when we looked at it. And, then, the impact on the budget, I have added that in, on who we would think would be, but once this is adopted, we would certainly wanna ask and get it filled out in a correct form, and I'd work through Jennifer to make sure it's legally sound on, I accept this pay raise or I wanna grandfather mine in.
Okay. And even given that adjustment, you're still saying there would be a net increase in the cost of this?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
All right, so, is there any further discussion on this aspect?
Can I ask the
Go ahead,
director a question?
Mr. Lacona.
So, wherever I can receive direction from, I can build this into the budget once we get people's, grandfathering in answer and all of that information, I guess, I'll take direction from the superintendent or from the board. Do we wanna see this in a budget draft at a future meeting? Do you want us to kinda move forward on that?
How difficult would it be to do a separate column like you did for the 3% raise?
It would be pretty easy, yeah. Doesn't bother me.
Okay.
Chairman?
Sir.
I guess for me, there's two pieces here, right? As a board, we would be adopting the pay scale. And then there's the budget side of that too, so I'm not sure. I guess, having had the discussion, I mean, as long as you're comfortable with the number, that's really all I need to see in however it plays out, for the purposes right now of you coming up with a number that you're comfortable with presenting with the budget. That's just what I'm needing, I guess, unless I'm the only one that just sees it that way, but I'm not sure I need to see a separate column that splits it out, 'cause I think it may make it more confusing at the end of the day.
Well, I guess this will be taken back up at our next discussion, or, Mr. Sims.
Just a quick thing.
Thank you.
Just my opinion, for $46,000, we've thrown $46,000 at tons of different projects. If you think that this is going to make our administrators, if it's gonna move the needle for our kids, if they're gonna push our teachers to perform higher, to really make an impact, I think we need to do this, find a way to do this. If it is your true belief, if you've seen it in action at another school or something, I mean, we've spent a whole lot more on things that had no impact than $46,000.
Let me be clear, the 46,000 would be, if we did adopt this, how much would this cost us for raises every year? It'd be maximally 46,000 on that point. I'm gonna, work with Doug and we'll get the cost analysis on that, and also the cost analysis of if we keep going the way we're going versus this one. If you remember, board, this was one of the things that was presented to me, gosh, probably September, because when there was a distaste, I guess you could say, for the current way we have our administrator pay raise, which is based off of number of teachers. It has all these just fluid things in it, and so, like I said, I went and I looked at districts around us, looked at different things they do, and basically you either had it was based off an index, a lot of them had, teacher raise, teacher pay scale times the index, and this one I'd seen where it was just this is what you make, and the incentive of your raise was how well your school did. So the board chose that they would like to look at this direction, and made sure, I think one of the comments was make sure to pay our administrators as top 16 administrators, so we looked at that as well, and this is what we came up with. So I just wanted to be clear about the 46,000, that would be the step increase every year on it, the maximum potential.
I'm just curious why you think this will move the needle with our administrators.
This is just incentivizing moving the needle, making sure that, it's just, your performance is what your raise is based off on, like many of, workplaces we have, your raise is based off of how well your performance is. And so, it kinda goes along that theory. Some people that do have a problem with this, and, the carrot doesn't move the needle, it's what you teach them how to move the needle, not just saying, here's the number to go for. So, in itself, I can't say it does move the needle, and nor would I ever wanna say that, but it does incentivize, if you do move the needle, you're rewarded for it.
But the people that actually move the needle for the most part are our teachers, and there's no incentive-based pay for them. There hasn't been any revision in that, correct?
Correct, I was just tasked for this administrative pay scale.
But do you think that would be more beneficial to provide an incentive-based pay for teachers if they're level 3, 4, or 5?
We could,
Potentially getting away from an automatic step raise.
we could look at that. I do know one other district, I think, that does that, but, that is something we can look at, but that would be something I'd have to look at the MOU to see if we're able to do it, because the MOU does have step raises in it, I think. I'll have to double back and look. It does. So we'd have to be very careful about changing the teacher pay scale,
Okay.
based off of incentivized plan only.
The MOU may not be in existence for forever, so if I were you, I would encourage you to look at that
And we can,
in the future.
absolutely.
But I will just go back to, before I could approve any kind of 46,000 increase, I gotta see what these people are. I need to know how many specialists we got, I need to know how many
Right.
coordinators we've got, I've gotta see that org chart.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Along with that, I mean, I guess I was probably the person you were referencing that said that we should have top, pay for, I think it may have been me. But I had a condition on that I had some high expectations to go with the pay. So, I mean, that was one of the things, I think that goes with what Ms. Parker's saying. I think there's kind of two pieces to this. Obviously, I would like for us to move away from what I consider to be a faulty scale, how we were doing it previously. I think it's not student-based, let me just put it that way. What I see, this is moving more towards, something that is, at least in my view, more focused on if the students are performing better, then we can get some benefits to the administrators in that building. So, but again, I still would like to see the whole picture of this, of how this plays out, with personnel, each position, what we're talking about here.
Any other discussion on the administrator's scale? Seeing none, we'll move on. Raise. Who wants to take that one?
I just wanted to put in there that this was the calculation for the 3% raise across the board for employees on the superintendent proposal plus 3% raise column. That just further explains, I did round up, but our cost for a 3% raise is $2.4 million. And you can see salary broken out, Social Security, TCRS, Medicare, and then those items summed together. Since we haven't reviewed the entire budget yet, we've been through operations in those items, but I guess that is probably something that we would take by itself at a future meeting. I just put it on there just to inform the board.
Okay, and I just wanna get some understanding. The deficit that we're sitting at with the 2.4 whatever million, that includes the regular step raises
That's correct.
and we're still at a $2.4 million deficit.
Well, we're at more than a $2.4 million deficit. We are at,
Okay, then why is my number off?
yeah. So on the budget proposal, oh, that's just the revenues, sorry. 1.4, and you go to the last page. We can go ahead and zoom in. I don't really like this, I'm gonna go ahead and download it. So the deficit on that would be 7.2 million
With the raise.
with the 2.4 million in, for a raise calculation right there.
Okay, when I kept saying 2.4, I was looking at maintain with the step raises.
Yeah, that's right here. That's just step raise that has current staff, and just a step raise, and then no additional positions, none of the department head requests. The following column does have step raises with the additional positions and current supply ask from the department heads. The next column is what was determined at exec between the department heads and that team, which lowered the budget, and then also the final column in adding the 3% raise to it to get to that 114,380 total expenditure number and a $7.2 million deficit.
So then basically, okay, never mind, I got it now.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion on the raise part of this? Okay, next item.
The next item is an FTE schedule. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the link. You should have this in here. We did our best to break out our object codes and the position within those object codes and compare previous year FTE to, or this year's FTE to current year FTE. So that's just another report for you to review. The total difference is 19, an increase of 19 FTEs. So that's for your viewing pleasure. If you have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to reach out or ask now.
Okay, any discussion on this? Sure, go ahead.
Doug, is this something I guess you pulled out of the payroll software that we're able to? Yeah.
Do you want the long answer or the short one?
Short answer.
Short answer.
All right.
Short answer.
The short one is
Okay. So if I could shift gears, Mr. Hickman, how many positions do we as the board have we approved for this district? Do we know that number?
Total we approved? Actually, I have that. Hold on 1 minute. Just had that up the other day.
For this budget year, it's 1538. For the current year we're in, that includes vacancies. We do have a good chunk of vacancies, maybe about 40 vacancies right now.
I had them like that.
The second thing is that this represents the 141 general purpose fund only. We have federally funded positions, we had food service positions, so this is just the 141 fund. Altogether, we actually creep around that 1857 number. That is what we put on our workers' comp insurance quote, 1,857 if we include our vacancies and the additional positions, which that includes cafeteria, it includes federal program funded positions. So this is just FTE funded by the 141 fund that is on your agenda today.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's a lot more. Are we? Well, yeah, it's to this. So, I guess, as I've been kind of saying along this way, this is, 6 years into, this is the first time I can recall that we have ever talked about them. Because I can tell you this, other than occasionally approving a new position administratively at the top end, this board has never formally, that I'm aware of, approved a number of employees. And I know, having looked at what we are required to by the state, we're supposed to do that. So what I'm trying to get to is to a point where we have a starting point, since we really have not had that, and it's been my understanding, numbers are just added as they felt like they needed to be added. And frankly, I would like that to stop immediately, and for us to have a starting point where we know what we've got, and if something in a single position needs to be added, it needs to come through this board to take place. Because so that's why I'm trying to get a number here for this. it still concerns me that we've never really approved that number of 1,857 people, or the 1,538, whichever one you wanna talk about, other than just, as a federal program, for example, is brought to us, and that fact that that includes some money and that it's going to include a person, it's just assumed. We've never really talked about the impact of that. So I would like this board, as part of this process right now, to have a formal number where we know we've started with, and that we track that individually moving forward, and we know what that is, and nothing is added. And I think that's also important for the discussion as we talk about budgeting for this, of those vacancies. I have a feeling if I go back in my memory, which gets fuzzy at times, but there's positions we've talked about for 3 or 4 years that have still not been filled over a 3 or 4 year period. So at some point, if I'm operating my own business, I'm starting to question why we're budgeting for an unfilled position for 3 years in a row. And that's just a reality of any operating, thing. So, and we've never discussed that as a board. Because, and this gets to my bigger thing of looking at these, I think we as a board have to really start talking about these numbers, since this is, I mean, I appreciate the operational side of the buildings and the fuel and those costs, but that's a fraction of what's really driving this budget. This is what's really driving it, and it is concerning at times that we've never really looked at this on a macro level and really try to dive into what these positions are, what are approved or not, and getting a handle on it. Because frankly, in my view, it's out of control, as is, we've discussed, because the next question is going to be, we passed a directive from this board to start doing a right-sizing plan, which I don't think is the right word for it, but that's what we've been calling it. And I would be interested when I see a net increase in personnel, are we removing any positions because of that, or moving anything around because of that? Also, because I struggle with that. How are we adding that many positions when we should be technically right-sizing, plus, again, a school is being closed? So how does that come out in the wash, if someone could explain that to me?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I've got the number here. It's 1,628 on the full-time employees, 127 on the part-time, with a grand total of 1,755. So 1,628 and 127. Does that include the vacancies? That's the positions.
That was from, when we calculated for the bonus. That does not include the vacancies. That's current working live bodies, yeah, in all funds.
And then, I do want to talk about the right sizing. We're looking at that, but we're also comparing it with looking at the state number that they give us for how big a class should be. And, we're gonna present both to show you guys what the difference of the two will be, and kind of let you see for your own eyes which way you want us to go. And Scott looks like he wants to talk about it a little bit.
I guess right sizing was proposed that you are presented with a student to staff ratio based on the size of the school. As we did that comparison to the way we look now, it looks like that, you know, we would have to hire more teachers in order to meet that class size requirement. So I guess I'm,
Okay, I gotta stop you right there.
yeah.
We had weeks of discussions about this, and now you're telling me it's going
Well-
to add? How is this the first we've heard of this?
Well, just looking at the ratios that we.
Did you look at these ratios when we had this discussion a year ago?
I wasn't, in looking at those ratios, I'm calculating the ratios now as I'm in the position that's preparing the budget. And that's when we started looking at that, and we compared what right sizing wanted to give you versus what the, regular class size EIA, what we're currently funded for, what that looks like. I don't know the whole information so far as right sizing, the proposal of how to staff, how that was given, or how that was proposed, but in looking at this, if we compare the school size, based on the projected enrollment and.
Scott, I gotta stop you right there.
Yes, sir.
This was not proposed. This was passed
Yes,
by
sir.
this board.
Yes, sir.
We had extensive discussions about this. And remember the staff to now come in 8 months later,
Mhm.
and 'cause frankly, you guys, it's been clear that you guys are not operating under a board policy right now. Okay, y'all are continuing to create a budget. It's not based on that. And now you're telling us that it was wrong. This is the first we've heard of this. and that you disagree with, I just,
And I hear what you're saying, and I think.
I'm not sure you do.
Yeah, well, and I think, what was said was that we would, look at staffing the right size, the way that it was proposed, that you would look at it as we move into this next fiscal year. So, as a part of that, that was part of as we looked at our projected enrollment, we did the staffing based on that right sizing. And, we're happy to, bring that information to you and let you look at it to see, what that staffing looks like.
So everything we were presented before was incorrect.
So, I'm missing the question.
There was, based on the numbers we were given, I guess we can go back to the original presentations, that there would be reductions in staff at some schools, and at others there would be an increase.
I don't know,
But understand, Scott, it is your job to know this.
Yes,
If
sir.
you're presenting us this information, and I mean
Right.
you and the collective, I mean
Right.
the entire,
I understand.
but it is your job to know that. Because
Right.
again, we passed the policy,
Right.
we passed a directive that has clearly been ignored to this point.
Well,
Am I incorrect on that?
it hasn't been ignored, it was
has
said that
been
we would
because the
move
budget has
toward
been
it,
presented that where you guys have not included that, and clearly operationally, you have no plan to do that.
where we would move toward it this year. That we would.
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, I'm not sure what that was the proposal
I would
that was.
suggest then that you guys may wanna look at what we passed
Okay,
and what you agreed to do, and decide whether or not you're following that.
okay.
Because it's insulting to me that we as a board passed something, and it's clearly been ignored. Because if you guys thought there was something wrong with this, it should have been brought to us well before right now, because this does impact budget. And I've been operating
I
under
agree.
the
It
assumption
does,
that we are going to be operating under what the board passed. So I'm just,
Okay, let us bring that information back I'm just wondering, I'm glad to bring that back and just look at the staffing according to that and bring that back to you.
All right, I'm gonna take this opportunity to ask for something that I've been asking for 6 years, which is, how much does it cost at each school? How many teachers do we have to have? Do we know that? Can you break those FTE numbers down per school and show us that? Because I think when you're talking about right sizing, I think that plays into it, because you're saying that you can't right size at some of the schools that they told us that they were gonna eliminate positions at because we would be out of compliance with the state. But I think there are other places that we are requiring local dollars to keep people in certain positions, and I think we need to know that too. So I'd really like to see it broken down at each school level, what we've got, what we expect based off of our enrollment numbers. Again, I'm gonna go back to the McDowell thing. I don't see how we can consolidate a school and add people. It just does not make any sense to me, and I know those kids are going somewhere, and we may have to add a teacher here and there, but I would not think that we're gonna have one new teacher at Randolph-Howell, one new teacher at Woodard, one new teacher at Highland Park, one new teacher at Baker, just because of how those kids shift out. But I need y'all to look at that. The other thing that I wanna make clear, and we as a board have been delinquent for a long time, I know, but there is a policy on staff positions, and it's possible that this is not correct based on what we've found out tonight, but I don't remember us talking about it in the last year, so I'm gonna assume that this is our policy still. But it says, all staff positions shall be approved through the budget process in accordance with an organizational plan submitted by the superintendent of schools, and before an additional position is established, the superintendent of schools shall present to the board a job description, qualifications, performance responsibilities, and the method by which performance of these responsibilities will be evaluated. I think there have been positions that have been added this year that we didn't get a job description on. We didn't get qualifications on. We didn't get that. So I hope going forward, that we can do that. 'Cause I know in the past, we've gotten into situations where things have gotten approved, and I'll go ahead and bring it up now, 'cause I don't know how it is reflected in the board, in the budget, but, we had discussions about kids on stage, and how we're paying outside of, how how we're paying outside of what our salary schedule is on that. And when I talked to Doug about it, he said, well, we can cover it because there's money in that line item. Well, that clearly was not the intent of this board, and so it got passed year after year because there was just extra money floating around there. Now, I do not want that to happen again. I still think it would be beneficial for those principals and assistant principals to be 1099s by Kids on Stage and get paid for the work that they're doing. I'm not saying it's not valuable work. I'm just saying it's an added responsibility that we have, and per that policy, that's not allowed.
No, I don't have any right now. I mean, we'll just say, if you look at the staffing comparison where they, say, where Doug has +5 teachers in 116, that +5 is, we're requesting to add 5 EL teachers because we have an increase in EL student population. So that's where that 5 extra teachers is. But, I want to, like you said, Mr. Moore, go more into, the right sizing and where, hopefully we can have some more discussion about that and, look at that actual staffing.
All right, I know there's been a lot of requests made during this conversation. Can we get some clarification on who's doing what after this discussion? I mean, what I'm hearing is a lot of things have been asked of you guys, and I wanna make sure that we're all on the same page of knowing what's what. Go ahead.
I think what I owe to you guys is a comparison of what the EIA or the general, what we're funded on, the 1 to 25, 1 to 20, what that looks like as compared to the right sizing proposal. And, bring that staffing information to you, that raw staffing information.
I mean, I would see that as a discussion outside of the budget. That's more of just I guess needs to be an entire work session in and of itself, as far as I'm concerned.
I can, yeah, I mean,
Because functionally, if you guys disagree with the policy that was passed, you guys would need to bring something to us to amend that. We would have to vote on it as a board, so I would think that would be.
Yeah, and I guess, for me, I've got, we've got the document that was passed in the board and what that looks like. But then when you look at the staffing so far as that, is it just raw staffing? It doesn't say that it includes, is it actual teaching staff? Does it include that staff plus you're separating what's funded by special ed or EAL on a separate staff? That's where, trying to find a little more clarity there to make sure that we're not giving you wrong information.
Which point, are you talking about the per school cost, or are you talking about the
right sizing?
I mean, the right sizing was based on formulas. That's
Yes,
where
yes.
I would like for you to bring back perhaps what was presented originally,
Yes, sir.
and show us where that was incorrect information.
Okay.
'Cause clearly it made sense at the time. I'm not sure what happened in between that now and then.
Chair Fulbright, I just have a quick question. Did we actually pass that as policy for the right sizing model? I thought we just discussed it. Can't remember. It did get approved?
It didn't get put into the policy manual, but, it'd be like the handbook getting approved. I think the minutes should reflect that we approved it.
I'll go back.
I couldn't remember if we actually voted on it or it was in discussion when Mr. Woodard was here.
When was that, roughly?
It would've been probably June, late June.
May of last year.
May, I think, yeah.
Okay, and then I've got pretty simple. Is there a way, or is it realistic to look at a school and say, this should be the budget for the school? The price for teachers, the price for administrators, the price for, I know food may or may not factor into that, but is that not realistic to think in those terms?
It's doable. We have staff at every single school. We have it verified. I can give you cost on that. I believe Eric's department has the building, the maintenance, you know, when we purchase, and if it's for that school, we tag it with that school's location code, so it is possible to do it that way, yeah.
And I'm not asking to make something more complicated than it needs to be, but for my way of thinking, if we could compartmentalize our spending, that at least gives a different picture, and I think that kind of getting to what Ms. Parker's saying, kind of, what does it cost to run Riverside? What does it cost to run Central? And to look at it in those terms, and if we see that one school has exponentially jumped up, we could look and say, why has Culleoka tripled the amount that they're spending on this or that or another? I mean, I'm not saying that that's what I want before I approve a budget or anything like that, but that's just a thinking in my mind of, can we get there, and would it be helpful or would it not? Now, it may not even be helpful, but just, I guess that's more of an out loud thinking at this point, but, okay, I'll quit pontificating.
Well, and I just
Go
wanna
ahead.
say, I think we always approach this budget very, I feel like, employee-centric instead of student-centric. Instead of saying, how many teachers do we need to educate our kids? What are we getting funded for? And what's gonna move the needle? And we don't know the difference right now. We need devices for kids. How much does that cost? So we're gonna need 2 extra tech people. I mean, you know, we've approved a bunch of technology in the last year, and now we're seeing it come back on the back end where we've got to pay for it through our operations. I just think that we need to start looking at what it costs to educate a child, not what it costs to employ a person in this district. And the sooner we get away from that, I think, the more we will see incentives to move the needle.
Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you. So, as far as what we were asking for, let me go back to that part. What I would like to see is that we are brought, an official complete org chart, and we as a board approve a number and a position and a place for every employee in this district in a formal way at some point to give us a starting point. Because it just, frankly, we don't have it. We have, and at this point, we just kind of have to accept whatever you guys are bringing to us. But we need a starting point. Or we can disagree with that, I guess, as a board. That would be the option, too. But we just need somewhere, because, again, I've been here 6 years, and we've never done that. We've never talked about this at all. Now, on top of that, and I'll just go to let me back up to the bigger picture where I'm coming from, is I'm looking at a proposed budget, or a proposed ask of $114 million, which, frankly, is absurd. I guess I'll just go out and say that. There's no way it's going to happen. And what I'm seeing is, over the 6 years I've been on here, we have gone up, I would hate to say, I think my budget the first year was $91 million, 93, somewhere around there, ballpark. That is a huge increase in the amount of money we are spending on education in this county. And frankly, I have not seen an improvement in the education in this county over that time. I have seen pockets of improvement. I have seen some changes. I've seen some things that have been improved in terms of facilities. We've absolutely done a better job there. But education has not improved. And I think, along with what Ms. Parker's saying, we are simply operating and not in a student-focused way. So if you're going to ask me as a board member to approve a budget that is that much greater, and take that and support that, and I'm just seeing nothing here that is improving education over what we had last year. I see nothing. I've seen nothing demonstrated that even shows that we're going to get better results next year because of this. What I see is personnel costs, even though we're getting rid of a school, are going up. And we're not improving education. And unless you guys can tell me how we are, because I haven't seen it yet. So something needs to change, because fundamentally we've been doing this wrong. And I don't know how we get it corrected, but we're just not doing a better job for the kids, but yet we are asking for more and more money every year. That's a disconnect. So again, if you guys want to tell me how I'm wrong on that, how we are improving education, how it's actually better, I would love to hear it. But until we can show that, I'm not going to go up on what we ask for from the citizens of this county to spend. Because again, this is local dollars. That's the important thing here. 'Cause we're asking every local resident to pay more money for what? To employ more people? To give a raise to more people? That's great. Are we improving education? Can anybody tell me we are? That's what I'd like to talk about, and we're not.
Any other comments on this section? Ms. Hopkins?
I guess too, we, looking back and then moving forward, we can talk about it, I guess, before COVID, 'cause surely now that things have been so mixed up. We have learning loss, we have teachers just spent beyond probably what they've ever factored or thought would ever be part of their education. I think that's all encompassing of where if before COVID we were behind and then COVID hit and we got behind. The restructuring of how we have to place things, and when you say are we moving forward in education, well, it's kind of a halt until we can even get learning loss put together and get that, back going. So not sure of the, like I said, the number for numbers, but just in that boat of where we are, that has been a significant nail in the box. Nobody knows how we need to exactly move forward having COVID. Will all the students be back in? That is our hope. But we've just been juggled and rearranged in so many ways in so many areas. It's just not. Yeah, we have to be student-focused, but the teachers have been impacted, which impacts our students. Our administrative has been impacted, and that impacts our teachers. So it's kind of like a cyclic effect that nobody has 100% answer to. You just don't, because you don't know. We didn't expect it. We thought we was going to go back to school, everything's going to be great. That's not what we are, and it's not realistic to have what you had in your box if the top was torn off of it and all your stuff was thrown out everywhere. That's what COVID did to everything. It changed so much. So before time you were on this trajectory and you were going. COVID hit, and you're trying to get through COVID and then back to where you were before to move forward. And that's how it's going to be for a while till we can get our bearings, so to speak. It changed everything, literally everything. I am so... when you talk about the teachers and their and giving incentives and raises, they actually deserve it, because what if our teachers quit because they could not deal with the emotional turmoil that was going on in their own homes, plus educating our children? What if we didn't have teachers anymore? Did we think about that? What if they decided to just leave because they just cannot? That's where we are. COVID changed everything, so we got to get a normal and a unnormal till we get back to where we're trying to build to. How that's going to happen, not 100% sure, but we have to think about that.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to take a second, and I did want to respond to Mr. Moore. Yes, this is a COVID year, and by golly, it's a hard year, and we're working hard tail ends off. But I go in these schools weekly, multiple schools, and these teachers are teaching. They're teaching from bell to bell. Have we moved the needle? Yes. One of the things that you guys did for the teachers this year, you gave them textbooks they've never had before. That moves the needles. We are training principals. That's where it starts from. Yes, the teachers are in direct effect to the students. If you look at all the research, it shows teachers have the most effect on the student. But right above that is the principals, because who has the most effect on teachers? The principals. We're rechanging, we're recalibrating, we're looking at how we do things. This year, we have been in mud, muck, and mire on trying to get policy corrected, try to get the foundations of what Maury County Public Schools, how we do things, get it back right, get it course corrected. this budget you see, we've been in a budget deficit for, Doug, 2-3 years now. Pretty much a deficit budget. Was money used places it probably shouldn't have been? I agree to that right away. We've got to start moving forward. Part of this, is natural. Even if we didn't change anything, Doug shows you how much this has to go up if you want that true budget I said I would bring to you. And I did. It shows where we won't be sitting hopefully in June saying, hey, we need $1.5 million to pay teachers this summer because we knew going into this was a deficit budget. We were pretty adamant to make sure to let everybody up here see how many personnel do we have? How many are we budgeting for? What's the net gain? What's the net loss? We'll be able to tell you that. You'll see it. We have really started to move the needle. Teachers in this district, if you would took COVID out of the equation, just having the textbooks in their hand is unbelievable. Staff is everything. Quality staff. I feel you need to take the staff you've got and train. We're basing our numbers that we're giving you based on not moving any in size. We do a lot of things every day, and we've really changed the way we've done things in this district. But a lot of it had to start here, and for the first 6-7 months, we had to change just at the district office how things were going to be done. We've lost people along the way. Frankly, possibly some of them probably should have gone. And we're probably going to lose a few more along the way. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure I'm doing what's best for kids in Murray County. That's why I took this job, that's what I sold you on, and that's what we are doing. We work hard to make sure we're getting this district back to where it is. I've told you problems we have to overcome, one being the 5th grade. We really need to get those back because when you go look at the scores, it's our transitional grades that are killing us. Absolutely killing us. We're looking at how we're doing our middle schools because we have two of our middle schools are ATSI schools and the other 2 are TSI. So we're focusing on how do we work on that? How do we work on the work? And we've brought in some pretty incredible people to help us with that, be it the state level, be it the regional level, be it even in the district level. We are moving the needle. I really feel, and if COVID be darned, I believe you guys would have had a return this year like you've not seen before. And I believe next year when we get back on track, you will see those returns. And I think I just take exception because we are really working hard in this district to move that cheese is what I tell everybody. And it's moving. Takes a long time to get a battleship turned around, but we've moved this sucker around faster than had been expected, and we'll continue to get that battleship turned around.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item we have before us, if there's no further conversation on this, intercounty analysis of district financials and student enrollment. My page cut off. All right, go ahead.
So this also is just a report for your information. These are interactive documents, so you can just slide from the enrollment level of 4,000 up, and it highlights the counties it's referring to. You also have a handy-dandy list up here. Helps you out a little easier. So Wilson being the 10th largest in student enrollment. Some of these were close because they vary. This is actually budgeted revenues and expenditures by school district. It looks like it cuts off right there, so I'll just go to the next page. But they're interactive. You can click on them. The levels change. There's actual data behind them. That's the budget we approved last year for the 2021 fiscal year. In comparison, further down the page, these are our actuals through the fiscal year 1920. And you can hover over the color, and it gives you comparison to each county. Student enrollment, also change the year on this. This is the specific revenue we're looking for, though, budgeted revenues and expenditures by student. And these, if you wanna compare districts right around, the enrollment level of Murray County, you'd look at Sevier, Madison, Putnam, Robertson. For example, budget by student allocated, total budget by student, Murray County's right at about $8,000. Madison's at $8,118. $8,118. Sevier is at $10,274. Putnam at $7,895. We are basically the third largest enrollment county out of Wilson through Tipton, but we received the fifth largest budget by student. So, out of those 7, so, you know, we rank higher in enrollment, but we are funded at a lower level. We also have BEP, or actual revenues and expenditures by student, by county. And then we have BEP by student, and then BEP by county as well. So you can see this was previously, and our actual BEP went down to $59,260,000 for 2021, so that we can update for that as well. But by student, $4,581 for Murray County. Like I said, out of this particular group of counties, Wilson, Sevier, Murray, Madison, Putnam, Robertson, and Tipton, Murray County is the third largest in enrollment, but we are the fourth funded. So we're funded less than our enrollment comparison-wise. But this is just for your information. You can feel free to go through and poke through here, click on things, download data. This was sourced from the Comptroller's audit, and also the Comptroller's Office of State and Local Finance, where their budgets are stored, and the Tennessee Department of Ed through their ePlan website. So that's where the data comes from and is tied to. And if you have any questions about the document or desire to look at it, it's here for you. That's it.
Thank you very much. Were there any insights that you gathered that you needed to share or would like to share quickly?
Just the fact that, I mean, I was just saying that compared to the districts close to us in enrollment, it does seem like when it comes to BEP, we are not where we should be as far as enrollment, and then at the same time for total budget, we are behind that, when it comes to knocking it down to a cost per student. You know, we're out of those 7 counties I've listed, we're the third largest when it comes to student enrollment, but out of 7 counties, we're the 5th highest funded. So that's a difference.
Okay.
So it's basically comparing. It's information I think that would be beneficial for the commission to see. It's funny how things swap. Some of the higher counties that don't receive as much BEP per student, they are heavily supported locally, which makes sense to me. For example, Sevier receives $10,274 per student, but they only receive $3,086 per student from BEP, so that's a massive local funding. Mm-hmm. So and that's expected to differ from county to county, and how the school board and county commission interacts together and how much the state allocates them, so.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you giving that breakdown. The last item that we have before us is to determine our next meeting and what we want to get done. We are scheduled to meet Tuesday evening, 6 o'clock here. What are our next steps Mr. Hickman or Mr. Laconin? What do we have before us next?
I believe it will be ready for the instruction, but Mr. Gaines, due to some of these requests, has said that we're gonna need a little bit more time to make sure we have them right and have them ready. So we feel like we will not be ready Tuesday, if that's okay.
Mr. Laconin, do you have anything?
I don't have anything. I mean, with the request that I have, I can update what I can and get it out. I mean, we have an instruction budget. From discussion here today, it sounds like, you know, some cuts need to be made as well to bring something back from the comments that were made. I don't know if that's how the board feels as a whole. But I could definitely see that taking some time, you know, and then for you all to have time to review whatever is put together. I mean, there's 24 hours, you know, almost 24 hours between when you would get the documents and when you would be making decisions on them or looking at them.
Okay, well then what's the will of the board going forward? Let's start with Tuesday night. Are we able to do anything Tuesday night?
How quickly can they get us a date for when they can have something?
Yeah, when can we?
I want to add that we're sending out our principal re-enrollment requests. They're going out earlier this week they normally don't go out till April. We've pushed that up. Those are due back. Jennifer, when do they due back? Friday. So taking that information will help us better. I know there is some concern about that we haven't lost staff relative to McDowell. You know, there are some staff that we've already viced against retirement, so they're not really showing as being a reduction because they're actually going into another position. So that may help us be more clear about where some of those positions will be going and trying to, in terms of the net out of what positions are left. You can look at raw staffing, but you also have enrollment projections, and you do have to account for that. I know that y'all certainly don't want us to present one number, go into the budget, and come and have an increased enrollment over the summer, which we don't think that we will, but we want to be fairly close as we can, where we don't have to come back and say, hey, we need to hire 5 more teachers because we have an increase in enrollment within the first 20 days, which that causes classrooms to move around and those things. And I know we can't stop that, but trying to get a little we've done that based on our projected enrollment right now, but having that information on hires and rehires will help us to narrow the staffing a little closer. Like Mr. Perriman said, we have really, I know Mr. Lucona and Chipper, they have really worked a lot on helping us give a actual by the number, what the salary is, benefits and everything of every teacher. So getting that salary really close is one thing we've been really blessed to have this year that helps us really calculate what that actual budget numbers are.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
yeah.
Ms. Parker?
Well, I just want to say, I'm not necessarily trying to say that the teachers at McDowell won't, I assume they would be absorbed into our district, but I also feel like right now we have a lot of vacancies, is my understanding, at various schools. And I really want us to be really realistic about what we can staff too, because I don't think it does these kids any benefit to have a dedicated substitute teacher because we cannot staff it with a teacher. So I really hope that we'll, look at what our BEP is, look at, what we need, what's going to move the needle, but I don't think a permanent substitute teacher moves the needle.
No, that's the worst thing I've experienced.
And let me give you some clarity on that too. One of the things that I've been working with Jennifer with is of all the resignations, retirements, things like that, we're making sure to place some of the McDowell teachers there, so that way we can go ahead and make sure those areas are full, and that way when we get to, are we going to be at a deficit or are we going to be at a positive number of staffs, we'll already have those placed, so when we do a reduction, we won't be telling anyone, hey, there's no job for you. So that's one of the things we're working on right now.
Are you just placing these teachers at schools, or are you having them interview for, because, I'll be honest with you, I want the principals at our schools to be picking their people.
Right.
Not you guys.
Well, I agree with that to a point, but we are also just, like, for example, we know one school reached out to us, they had a retirement, they asked if they could take that position, they could take that person, we're like, absolutely, so check marked off, and we are talking to principals as we do this. Okay.
And they did interview before they There they did talk to the teacher, the principal did talk to that teacher before they. Yeah, well, I mean, it's just we actually had a vacancy and a staffing move, so there's not it was a qualified teacher from one position to another, so you can't reassign people.
Okay, I wanna ask, what all we left some ambiguity with the capital budget. We don't have that pinned down yet. I know we need to tackle instruction first. Kinda how are we proceeding with this, Mr. Laconin? Give me some insight and advice.
We do have March 30th, on the old, budget calendar that was emailed out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Will that give instructional budget enough time and then for us to be able to look at it ahead of time?
Yeah, and I can make it if y'all can. And we can bring back capital instruction, and the request. The per school cost, is that something you would want on the 30th? I don't know that it was a request, but I remember it being discussed.
I don't know that it's gonna be beneficial. I mean, it'd be interesting to see.
I'd like to have it.
Okay.
Well, and I was gonna say, if we can at least get personnel costs for each school, I think that would be,
Okay.
that's the vast majority of it.
Okay, that's fine.
I can get that for the 30th.
I'm good with that. So then we'll tackle capital instruction and the per school personnel cost. Just a look at that.
Yep.
Now, this will be, let me look at how it was worded on the calendar. Budget discussion, so would we be able to vote? I guess that'd be a Jake question, but it would be a regular work session, would it not?
As long as we post it before,
Okay,
do whatever we want.
all right. Then is it the board's will not to meet on the 23rd, but to meet on the 30th? Okay, I got heads nodding and bobbing and everything else. All right, then I will, yeah, the spring break is the following week. Mr. Moore?
Yeah, if I could just kind of sum up where I'm coming from on this in case you haven't figured it out yet. I firmly believe that we as a district have never had to approach personnel from a true sense of that was student focused. Because as we discuss this, it is employee focused, the discussions. And I don't think everybody realizes sometimes just the words we use kind of show where we're at on that. I think, and if you look at our budget, that is where the bulk of the costs are going. And there's really, and in the past, over the last 6 years, we've tried to squeeze, as we get to the end of the budget season, we've tried to squeeze facilities just to literally get pennies out of that. And we keep putting off the big elephant in the room, which is personnel costs. And I will say, I think we have too many employees. You can say you don't like it, and the reason is, it's not intentional. Nobody came into that thinking, let's just do that. It's because, as a district, we've really never taken a hard look at programming across the district, and it just kind of happened at each school. And you end up with teachers, and you end up with staff, and it just grows, as things do, and no one has ever taken the hard stance to actually put it in check, to understand what this organization is supposed to do, and align those two things together. And at some point, whether it's this year or next year or sometime, it's going to have to happen. Because frankly, we're looking at a $10 million increase in what we budgeted, or what we asked for last year, is what, if we would go with what's on here, which was already at a deficit then. And again, I think as a realistic person, someone's gonna come in. I know COVID happened this year. I'm not gonna get this, because I've been looking at this for longer than just this year, so these are systemic problems. But again, we had a $103.9 million budget. I think what was it, right, last year, ballpark. We've had $10 million so far in federal funding get thrown on top of that. There's another $18 million coming. So at some point, we can't use too much COVID excuse, because there's a lot of resources coming our way to address a lot of those things. So let's kind of set that aside, because that's really not our problem here. So I'm saying, as a county commissioner, or even myself, what does another $10 million on top of all that get me next year? And I still haven't heard, I've heard pieces. but that is almost a 9% increase in the total budget, plus that extra $28 million that's thrown in the mix there. Free money. So I'm just saying that these are realistic things, and again, if I'm putting myself in the county commission side, they should be asking that question too. But I think until we start to address the personnel side of this, and I'm sorry that's a difficult discussion nobody wants to have, that we have too many people, but no one has shown me yet why that's incorrect, because that's the only thing left that we have not talked about in totality year after year. We have squeezed every building fund. We've sat here and taken tires off what we replaced tires on buses to try to get $100,000 there, and nobody wants to talk about the rest of it. And that's why, to be fair, Scott, I know you come in here and you kind of took the brunt of my comments earlier. It's frustrating when we're back doing this and nobody keeps wanting to talk about what's really here. It's the personnel side. It's the bulk of where our budget goes. And I really would like to see us actually have a plan for that. Now, if you guys can come in and kind of show us how that personnel number and where all those places are, and there is a reason for every one of them, I can try to get on board, but I've never seen it. Again, 6 years I've never seen it. These things just happen, and we have to fix it at some point. I run my own business. I know this isn't a business, but in a lot of ways it kind of is. There are certain things that are standard across that. And again, looking at this as a business, we are too heavy on personnel, and we're not getting the results I feel like we could be or should be. Because I've said this to teachers. I always get beaten up a lot about this, about not wanting to give teachers their fair share, or not wanting to be in favor of raises. But again, you can understand from my frustration point is when we are overstaffed already, to just pay that overstaffed more, I struggle with that. Because again, the pie's only so big, and to get bigger slices, there has to be less slices. We can't just keep going and asking for more money, which is what historically we've done. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. So if you can understand that, that's what I'm shooting for here. Because I would love for us to have high-quality instruction taking place, and that and can reward those teachers very richly for doing a wonderful service for our kids. That's what I want. But we've got to fix some things to get there. I mean, that's what I'm looking for here, is to get it where we can have that.
And I just want to say I agree with you, and that was one of my commitments, and why it feels like the budget's dragging out, because we are trying to really pull this apart piece by piece, seeing where exactly everything is going, and just dismantling that 103 and seeing what it actually did for us and what some of the deficit did as well. That was some of the tasks I gave both of these gentlemen sitting to my right and left, is we want to be able to explain it in depth for whatever questions. And hopefully we'll get there on the 30th and be able to show you. You know, one of the things I hope that Doug did show you on average, you know, we're not being funded like other districts our size. And, you know, were we at the bottom? No, we weren't, thank goodness. But it also shows that, you know, for the personnel we have, I mean, we're pretty much on par with what those other districts, if not a little bit behind on the funding budget. But we'll hopefully be able to, well, not hopefully, I keep saying hopefully, we will be able to show you those each school, where it lines up and where those personnel are as for the district. And, you know, Eric's kind of talked to you what he has and his needs, and he's running short too. But, you know, and I'll use this moment, you know, I sat in a meeting on Friday with Chair Fulbright, and I got to hear how a legislator talked about all the great things in Tennessee and how they're all this great, and then started talking about education. I had to do everything I could do but to bite my lip. You know, what they don't tell you, the rest of the story is, you know, they're bragging about a $1.6 billion coffer up at the state of Tennessee that they have. And we are the 5th lowest funded state in the nation when it comes to our students. And, you know, and then hopefully showing our county commission, you know, we're not off from districts our size, not off at all. Matter of fact, we're a little bit behind. So we want to be able to show that, you know, it's just not worth throwing out these exuberant amounts just because we want. We want to align it to showing you what we need and got to have. We got to have, because we have to have these EL teachers because of federal and state kind of guidelines. We have to have these. It's not that we want them, and that's what we hope we'll be able to show you. So I appreciate your patience with us during this time, and I really do want to be able to give you exactly what you want in a budget this year and understand it completely. We're not just adding this many teachers or this many more positions, so we're keeping last year and funding more, showing exactly what we have. And that's all I have, and thank you again, Board, for your patience with me. And, like I said, I wanted to give you a true budget this year. I really wanted to give it to you.
All right, well, thank you all board members for taking a Sunday afternoon to come and tour this. I feel it was productive. I feel like it's given us a very good start going into the rest of the budget. And beyond that, I guess we'll see each other on the 30th.
Mr. Fulbright, can I say that if anybody has questions about the Capitol, because I know it's kind of still suspended out there, you can call me or send me an email and I will respond to everybody with anything you need. Thank you.
Actually, I do feel